Her Excellency Mama Rebecca, Vice President and Chair of Gender and Youth Clusters in the Republic of South Sudan, sisters from South Sudan and beyond, in Africa and beyond, brothers as well who are in the room, I want to beg your indulgence for me to stand on all protocol already observed so we can go faster. On the 15th of August 1999, at exactly 11:55 p.m., while struggling with the reality of being a human instead of a myth, the strong Black woman passed away. She passed away without the slightest bit of hoopla. Medical sources say she died of natural causes, but those who knew and used her know she died from being silent when she should have been screaming, from milling when she should have been raging, from being sick and not wanting anyone to know because her pain might inconvenience them. She died of an overdose of those other people clinging onto her when she didn't have the energy for herself. She died from loving men who didn't love themselves and could only offer her a crippled reflection. She died from raising children alone and being blamed for not doing a complete job. The strong Black woman died from the lies her grandmother told her mother and her mother told her about life, about men, and about racism. She died from being sexually abused as a child and having to take that truth everywhere she went, every day of her life, exchanging the humiliation for guilt and back pain. She died from being battered by someone who claimed to love her, and she allowed the battering to go on because she loved him too. The strong Black woman is dead. She died from being a mother at 15, a grandmother at 30, and an ancestor at 45. She died from sacrificing herself for everybody and everything when all she really wanted to do was dance. Sometimes she was stomped to death by racism and sexism executed by high-tech ignorance while she carried the family in her belly, the community on her head, and the race on her back. The strong, silent Black woman is dead. Or is she still alive and kicking? I know I'm still here. End of quote. This poem was written by an unknown author. And Madam Vice President, I wanted to start there because sometimes moments like these get us on a high. We come together, We celebrate each other, we connect with each other, we connect with the energy, but then we go back to our places of loneliness, of aloneness, and we continue to suffer. And very little in our reality changes. So some of us have traveled from far away to come to this conference, which as a UNDP official, I'm very proud that we have been part of it. We have come here not because South Sudan is close by, but because we understand the importance of the journey, the sojourn, and the distance that this country has traveled, as we heard from our sister earlier. Your Excellency, this morning, you recognized the solidarity that we have with the people of Turkey and Syria as we witness the unfolding human tragedy that was occasioned by an earthquake. I want to join you and also solicit the audience to pause for a second, to take it in, that in a matter of hours, more than 30,000 people were buried. Let's just pause for a second and think about it. Let us be with them, those communities, those families that suffer now from something that was not man-made, a natural disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, even as we consider that, I want to propose that the pain, the suffering, the death that we experience in this country, on the continent of Africa, is largely man-made earthquakes. And I also want to say that that earthquake, at the heart of it, is exclusion and exploitation of women. And today, we come together to make a commitment to start laying the tracks that will see the end of this earthquake. Everyone in this room is here because they feel this pain. You may not have experienced it directly. The pain that Mama Rebecca explained this morning when she spoke in such a moving way. We are in touch, each one of us, with what it means for a woman who wakes up at 3 in the morning and she does not stop until she drops. And yet, there is not much thank you that is in that labor. We continue to see this suffering in this country. Yet we know that we have women in the history of this continent that have been transformational leaders. From the market woman of Aba in Nigeria, where I come from, Eastern Nigeria, who successfully led a revolt against oppressive tax regimes during the colonial era, removing the shackles that slowed down their economic and business pursuits. From Cape to Cairo, history has recorded the courage, competence, capability, and compassion exhibited by women transformational leaders. In the recent times, President Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, who we shall hear from shortly, in her 2 terms as president, advanced women's political leadership in Liberia and won a Nobel Peace Prize for her work in promoting women, peace, and security in that country, and now extended to Africa. We have women such as our sister Lima, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who stood against war, oppression, and demanded peace for her people. She's here with us today, as are many rural women whose voices and achievements are rarely documented. This conference will elevate their voices. In South Sudan, in this beautiful country of beautiful people, we recognize our gallant women liberators, starting with Her Excellency, Mama Rebecca. Her Excellency, the First Lady, Mary Iron, whose words we just heard, Honorable Rebecca Okwachi, Honorable Mary Apai, Honorable Angelina Tenney, Mary Nyaulang, Ambassador Situna Abdallah, Honorable Matika Matindar, just to name a few, and I could go on. There are so many more of Africa's foremost transformational leaders in government, in the United Nations, if I may say. Some of them are here, in civil society and in the private sector. So, what we talk about here today, ladies and gentlemen, is real. It's no longer a taboo that we dare to imagine a world led by women, an Africa led by women, and a South Sudan with women at the helm, moving and shaking and creating hope for the generations to come. This conference is timely as South Sudan enters a critical time in its history, promulgating a new constitution and conducting the first ever elections as a sovereign state. It is also a critical period as we have seen resumption in violence in Upper Nile as well as Eastern Equatoria. It is disheartening to see the unimaginable suffering of women and children who are already burdened by climate insecurity. It is equally disturbing as we watch and witness the resumption of conflict in Eastern DRC, leading to repeated and prolonged suffering of women in that country as well. It is no coincidence, therefore, that this conference is taking place on the heels of the visit of the Pope to both countries. And I want to ask that we be guided by the words of the Pope during his visit here, and I quote, "Women, mothers who know how life is generated and safeguarded need to be increasingly involved in political life and decision-making processes. Women need to be respected, for anyone who commits an act of violence towards a woman commits it towards God." End of quote. If you agree with the Pope, I want you to say yes. Yes. Despite South Sudan's significant normative advances that have resulted in increased formal participation of women in politics and governance institutions, there is still a gaping hole. Still exists significant institutional, social, economic, and cultural impediments that constrain women's effective participation in decision-making, particularly in conflict resolution, but also in state building, in post-conflict recovery, and in the economy. And of course, the delays that we're seeing in the implementation of certain aspects of the revitalized peace agreement remains a challenge in the quest for gender equality and women's empowerment. Women's economic and political empowerment is central to realizing women's rights and gender equality. Women's economic empowerment includes women's ability to participate equally in existing markets, their access to and control over productive resources, access to decent work that is paid, access to internet, control of their own time, their lives, and their bodies, an increased voice, agency, and meaningful participation in economic decision-making at all levels. When more women are given equal access to paid work, economies grow, kids go to school and they stay in school, and their health and nutrition are secured. Women's economic empowerment boosts productivity. It increases economic diversification and income equality. How do we increase the number of women in paid work, not just in South Sudan, but on the continent of Africa? Your Excellency, I want to conclude with an interaction I just had during the break with two women. One, a young woman called Angelina. She was only 2 when conflict expelled her from her own country and from the embrace of her parents. She ended up a refugee all those years. And I asked her, why did you come back? She said she came back as an adult to help, to support. Did you have to? She said, no, I had other opportunities. But what made it possible for her to come back as an enabled woman, even though she was a refugee in next-door Ethiopia for all those years? She went to school. She attended school, supported by UN agencies, UNHCR, among others, UNICEF. She was invested in even as a refugee. Some of the partners here paid for that. Angelina comes back, and today she's a leader in trying to bring healing to communities who have been broken and dislocated. That is hope, ladies and gentlemen. That is hope. The second woman I want to talk about, I just met her. She's a county commissioner at the county level, bubbling with energy. Her eyes bright and hungry. And she said to me, I am one of 2 women among 84 men county commissioners. 2 out of 84. And she said, I arrived, there was nothing on the ground, and people looked forward to my failing. But guess what? I'm not giving up, but I'm alone. There are no women around me. There is no network. There is no one to talk to when I'm down. There is no one, no circle of women. The men have their circle. They have their networks. They lift each other up, but she's alone. This conference is going to change that. Your Excellency, unless we stop making conferences like this about speeches and more about investing in the Angelinas and the Rebeccas, where we see their force of humanity transforming lives because they have the backbone. Us, we have to be the foundation, the backbone. And I finish with a challenge to us women who have been given positions, some in high places. Always look behind you and ask, who do I have following? Who have I helped to follow? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ahunna, for these encouraging remarks. You acknowledge the narrative on the impact of sexual violence in Africa, and particularly in South Sudan. You acknowledge the importance of the journey of women in the Republic of South Sudan. You also acknowledge the distance that South Sudanese women have come all the way up to this current time. But you also recognize transformational women leaders in South Sudan, but also in Africa. And you also talk about the guidance given by the speech of the Pope. Thank you so much. Can we applaud her again?